So I'm checking how long to beat, and well, this game looks like it's gonna be like a blast to play. Let's see how long it's gonna last me. Yo, it's just 20 hours long? That's just trash!
Oh wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Hello everyone, so this is a lightning rod of a topic to talk about, but you know what, I think I'm gonna give it a go. Game length versus game quality and how that determines the game's value. Is the game's real value tied intrinsically to how long you can explore the world, progress through the storyline, and gain an affinity for the game's mechanics? Does every game need to be over 50 hours long to really get the most out of the purchase that you made? Or does the game's length really matter, especially if you're getting a fantastic experience anyway? It's a contentious thing, of course, where anything below 20 hours or so is being seen as not worth full price. You'd rather wait for a sale to get the most of what a short game experience will offer you value-wise. At the same time, there's a growing consensus that some long games pad out the experience with tons of bloat that isn't really needed, and it doesn't back up the value and the quality that the game itself is really offering. What does it mean to have a game that nails the length of its story and side content the right way? And does its quality also play a factor on, regardless of how long it is, you're having a great time playing it regardless? I'm gonna talk about it in length of this video. This is probably one of the biggest factors in really determining not only how long a game is, but also how its story and gameplay factor into the length and value of a video game. Pacing is generally important when trying to keep a steady and fun gameplay loop, alongside delivering a story that is compelling and engaging enough for people to keep playing your game. If a game keeps the consistency of its gameplay and story at the right tempo as you play through, it ends up feeling like a more satisfying experience from start to finish. Of course, if a game is extremely short, let's say 5 to 7 hours, maybe even 10 hours, it has to not only justify itself in its value for money, but also in how tightly designed the game's experience is. The Katamari games were fantastic examples of this. They're designed to be tight, short experiences, and even though the remasters cost like £25, I clearly didn't care about the length because playing those games was an absolute joy from start to finish. I got great value out of those games. Video games are not a cheap hobby, let's be real. Games nowadays cost $70, and as games grow larger in scope, content and length, the expectations for games are different now. It's much easier to sell people on a game that not only is far longer to play, but one that also packs with a ton of content. We're talking lore, side quests, things like that. If a game is less than 20 hours long, the general consensus is that it's a much harder sell based on not only length, but the overall value of that game is being put into question. Recently, people were talking about Spider-Man 2 and how that game wasn't worth $70 because it was up to 20 hours long for the story and 30 to 40 hours to 100% everything in-game, from like side quests to the trophies. Yeah, I get some people want to get the most out of their game that they paid for, but at the same time, the previous games were great experiences. Aside from the MJ and Miles missions, they were tightly designed, paced extremely well, and the gameplay just felt so good to play. I just feel like pacing is very important as long as the gameplay and the story doesn't overstay its welcome. I'd probably want to give 2 examples of games that actually nail this extremely well. Resident Evil 4, the original game at least, you just keep on playing because the story just feels paced correctly, you aren't doing any monotonous tasks throughout your playthrough, and enemy variety is second to none. I've talked about this game before in a previous video, but 999's pacing in regards to its story is amazing. There's no fluff, no padding out the story. There's a natural order of progression as you continue to solve the puzzles, no matter how long they might take you to complete. It's easily one of the best written visual novels for that reason. Conversely, there are games that just don't hit the mark, at least for me personally, when it comes to the pacing of their story and gameplay. I liked Red Dead Redemption 2, but I just felt that for some parts of the game, the pacing was all over the place, and I still just can't get over how slow the game is when it comes to the overall speed of its controls. Roach, move! However, I'd argue that gameplay pacing affects certain games not as negatively as you'd think. If the core gameplay loop is fun to the core, you might not feel like it's dragging you constantly to bits. Travis Strikes Again No More Heroes is a perfect example of this. One of the biggest complaints of the game is the fact that the levels just continue to drag on. You never know when you're going to hit the final boss in the level. but it doesn't matter when the gameplay and combat mechanics still feel fun to enjoy. It still feels like No More Heroes. In fact, the pacing of its level design was really one of the only issues I had with that game, but it wasn't entirely a deal breaker. But what if a game promises so much content, so much in terms of length and replay value, and ends up struggling under the weight of its large scope? Open world games suffer from this a lot, with a long story, padded out by side quests that don't feel as significant as it's made out to be. I feel like if your whole basis for a game is to make as huge of a world as possible, but offer little in the way of meaningful content, the game itself becomes an obstacle. It's simply far too long to tackle and overstayed its welcome. There's a very good reason why I dropped some of Ubisoft's games, because the template of big open world but you want to pad it with some content that doesn't feel meaningful to the game itself has become extremely tired and stale. I'd love to explain more about it, but that's a future video for some other day. There are so many games out there that do not need to justify their length to keep you playing. Rather, in the case of games that aren't an RPG or an open world title, you have to craft a more tightly designed experience that respects not only your time, but also keeps you really engaged whilst you're playing. The number one part of this is replay value. If the game is incentivizing you to play it again after you finished it, then it has done a tremendous job at what it was supposed to do, to let you have fun. There's a different perspective at replaying a game as opposed to playing it for the first time. You feel more experienced, you feel that you've learnt more of the game's mechanics and game sense, and you're more prepared to tackle tough bosses, maybe at even higher difficulties. The Resident Evil games are a perfect example of how you can make the most of a short experience. The games last between 5 to 10 hours at most, maybe longer in the case of Resident Evil 4, but you get more content than if you were just to play an initial playthrough. There's the Mercenaries mode where you can fight waves of zombies, and after you finish your first playthrough, you unlock higher difficulties that test your overall skill to the limits, alongside other perks like speedrunning the game or playing with infinite ammo for another spin. It works so well for those games because they are already challenging enough, and it incentivizes you to improve your item management and your ability to fend off waves of zombies. Moving on to longer titles, Fallout New Vegas achieves this so expertly. Because there is so much content that you will have to play so much to discover it all, you can delve through not only the side quests, but learn about the fate of New Vegas if you pick one of the 3 factions or choose to go it alone. The game respects your time by letting you make that decision part way through the storyline. Shorter games also have the ability to just be easier to approach when doing a replay. If anything, you're getting as much mileage out of a 10 to 15 hour experience, or even shorter than that, if you're feeling the itch to play something again. But more importantly, there's something within those games that keeps us coming back. Maybe it's the gameplay and combat, maybe it's the art style, the story, the music. At some point there will always be a game out there that will hook you in, even if it's an extremely short experience, and that alone makes up the value that it offers. I don't think that there is a clear-cut answer when it comes down to determining what makes a game valuable in terms of how much content it has or how good it is. Yes, you will get a lot more out of a game that lasts around 60 hours or more versus a game that's incredibly short, but equally so, you can still get value out of a 10-hour experience if it incentivizes you to play again and tackle its most demanding experience yet. There are so many different ways of approaching these games that the idea of length versus quality determining value becomes a subjective one. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, or even subscribe to the channel. It's really appreciated. And also feel free to follow my Twitter and join my Discord in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.